Chairman, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee, and my name is Councillor Bridges, and I am Chairman of this meeting. The key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents, and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure that you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Some quick housekeeping rules before we go on to our main agenda. We are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers of fire exits out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed on silent or switched off. With that said, we move to our main agenda item. Apologies for absence, please.
There are no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications. Item 3 is to receive our minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 6. Are there any comments, or can we agree those as correct? Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items, which brings us on to Item 5, the Hillingdon Canals. I'm delighted that both Priscilla and David are here this evening to give a talk on basically a follow-up from our recent frontline visit on the canal on a recent boat trip, where a lot of in-depth conversations were had between different partnerships, and this really is to just recap and go through some of that for those who are unable to attend on the day. So David and Celia, whichever one wants to go first, please feel free.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I know a number of the people here, but a number of members I don't know. I used to work at this place for 38 years. I've been retired for 16 years now. But I chair the Hillingdon Canals Partnership, which is a multi-agency body that seeks to promote the canals in Hillingdon. I'm not sure how many of you would know that Hillingdon has more miles of canal than any other London borough. We're a big borough, obviously, but I think it's quite an accolade to have more miles than anybody else. The question really that we talked about on the boat trip was whether we're making adequate use of that asset on behalf of the local community. And I would like to say how delighted I was as chair of the Canals Partnership that you took the initiative to actually go out on the boat and see for yourself what the canals have to offer, and some local problems as well. But it's the first time that's ever happened in my knowledge that a committee's done that. So thank you for what you did. So I won't go through the paper in detail because I'm sure you've read it already, but I wanted to just highlight a few points and add one new point that I didn't manage to get in before I ended up in hospital for a couple of days. So, and that's about the current funding of the canals. So on the first page of the report, I've set out what the canals have to offer, and these are directly relevant to what I'm going to say right at the end. A very important part of the drainage system in Hillingdon. As a number of you know, the River Colne flows in and out of the Grand Union and supplies it with water and sometimes gets flooded. A green corridor through Hillingdon, great place for walking and cycling that Priscilla will talk about in later. Potential for what it does for our town centres in terms of improving the urban environment. A quiet place that you can get a place to relax. There's lots of evidence that being by water is good for people's mental health, and the canals certainly achieve that. Great place for volunteering, litter picking being the most prominent one, but other forms of volunteering. Potential for cooling buildings as part of tackling climate change. We haven't done much of that in Hillingdon, but it has been done in other places. And it's part of the local history of Hillingdon. So, there are lots of different factors that intertwine the canal with things that the council does. Many residents don't know anything about our canals. I think a number of you know I chair the Hayes Town Partnership, and people see this sort of drainage channel through the middle of the town, don't really know what it is, and certainly don't know that if you go one way it's London and you go the other way it's Birmingham, a significant place that they're unaware of. But the council has done some really good work in the recent period, particularly in relation to the towpaths. And I think that's what started your inquiry off, Chairman, the improvements of the towpath. As the towpath in Hillingdon has not been good. Puddles and crumbling and too narrow. And a programme started some years ago to improve the towpaths, partly with money from Canal and River Trust, but mainly from money from the Transport for London. The TfL money all dried up because of the pandemic and their financial mess that they got into, and the council has really been the saviour of that programme by using the opportunities to talk to developers about Section 106 money, and there's substantial improvements in the canal through Hillingdon as a result of that. It's not finished yet, but great improvements. And so again, that ties in. Now we've got the improved walkway. How do we make sure that people know about it and use it? Other things the council's done, I've listed throughout the report. Ward budgets have been used on occasions. The council has used chrysalis funding on one occasion in Hayes. So it's contributed in those ways. But the main thing, I think, from the Canals Partnership point of view, is what more can we do to exploit this asset in the future. The towpath I've mentioned, signage I've listed here. We noticed when we were on the boat trip, some really grotty areas of graffiti and tagging. Some of them get removed and others don't. Litter is a problem. Antisocial behaviour can be a problem. But one of the really good things that the Canal and River Trust has done has been working with local schools to raise awareness of children about the fact that we've got the canal, the history of the canal, a great opportunity for teaching the environment and water safety, and lots of aspects. And the Canal and River Trust have a specialist officer who will do all that sort of work, but not many schools have actually signed up for it. I think there's potential for doing more with our schools. And secondly, they used to be able to give them free boat rides, but because the Canal and River Trust is already suffering from funding cuts, those have been done away with, so we don't get any free boat rides at the moment. But the boat that we went on, Elsdale, as you saw, not in brilliant condition, but lots of potential. It was built over 20 years ago as a floating classroom. It was ahead of its time because it was electrically powered, and it was done by Groundwork Trust, got money from the National Lottery and other places. When that ran out, we lost the boat for a number of years to East London, but it's now back in West London, and there's a number of people who are really keen to get it going again as a resource for Hillingdon, not just for schools, but also one of council officers, the archives section, she organised a trip for people with dementia on a canal boat, remembering things in the past. There's lots of things like that, which I'm sure Priscilla could elaborate on as well. And canal side improvements, attached to the report that we've circulated is a list of some of the improvement schemes. The Canal Partnership, we've got a broad range of members, and they've got greater knowledge of the local areas than collectively we put that together. And there's a list of different improvement schemes there, which one of them, the top one, is just about to be done early next year, so that's good. Others are still in the pipeline, but the council again has helped by giving money for consultants to develop these schemes. The actual implementation of those schemes will be much bigger money, and it's a question of whether opportunities can be found with developers and others to fund them. And I mentioned lastly the Hayes Canal Festival, something that we started about 10 years or so ago. Councillor Janet Gardner supported that right from the beginning, and we got funding from the ward budgets for it. Fantastic event that draws a crowd of around 2,000 people. Councillor Scott Farley's been there as well. Really brings the community together, as well as telling them about the canal. So there's a whole range of different things there that we're doing and could be done. But if I could just finally just mention the missing bit, which is challenges ahead. I don't know if people are aware of the history, but it used to be British Waterways that ran the canals. They were a nationalised industry, and the government decided 10 years ago that they would find another way of running the canals, and they set up the Canal and River Trust, which is a charity. And the idea being that as a charity, it would be able to tap into other funding opportunities and wouldn't be dependent upon state funding in the way that it had been before. In setting it up, the government agreed that they needed money to get going in a different sort of operation, and so they gave them a grant which was tapered, but it was still a substantial amount of money to keep them going. Now that money runs out in 2027, which is not that far off, and the government's been reviewing whether it will continue that funding or whether it will change it. And they've decided that they will continue it, but at a much reduced level. And the Canal and River Trust, it has broadened its base in terms of funding. It's done a lot more fundraising. You can become a member supporter like the National Trust. You get free entry to the towpath is the most you get, rather than free entry to National Trust buildings. Now, that's raised a certain amount of money. Canal and River Trust does quite a lot with its land to raise money. Sells water to raise money. It's branched out in different ways, but there's still a big funding gap, and they reckon that taking predictions for the next period, that they will be £300 million short over the period of the next agreement with the government, and that's got all sorts of implications. Refer back to what I said right at the beginning, about the infrastructure of the canals, drainage, old structures. Some of these structures are 200 years old. They could collapse. You may remember a couple of years ago, a reservoir in Lancashire nearly collapsed. The wall of the reservoir, millions of pounds had to be spent on it. And the worry is that if the Canal and River Trust hasn't got base funding, that there will be a danger that things could get worse. And if money has to be spent on just holding the system together, then all the day-to-day maintenance is likely to suffer, and any initiatives will be the first thing to be cut. So the Canal and River Trust has actually launched a campaign called Keep Canals Alive, and they're trying to gather public support. And locally, we've had very good support as a Canals Partnership from John McDonnell in Hayes and David Simmons in the north of the borough. And we're due to meet with Steve Tuckwell for Uxbridge and South Ruislip as well. We've got a suggestion from the Canals Partnership that all three MPs should make representations on this issue. We know that obviously the government's got problems in funding, but this is a really important asset to Hillingdon. With David Simmons was very strong in support before the announcement of the settlement, as was John McDonnell. So we're due to meet the three MPs to try and take that forward. So I will finish there, but I hope that that's given you a picture of what we've got. It would be great if the council has always had the canals mentioned in strategy documents. The planning strategies, Hillingdon Borough Plan and so on, mentions the canals almost in a conceptual way, but we've never really, as a council, looked at all those strands across the piece. So, the health aspects, the schools aspects, the history aspects, all of those bits have never actually been joined together. So whether there is any possibility that your committee could take the lead on that, it would certainly be very much welcomed by the Canals Partnership if you did.
Thank you very much, David. We'll take questions after Priscilla, and that way we can combine it then. So whenever you're ready, Priscilla.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me today, and thank you for inviting me to a fantastic boat trip. In my 24 years, I haven't been here as long as David, but I have been here for many years, over 2 decades, and it's the first time I've had quite an enjoyable meeting, really. It was very good, very, very engaging as well. And I have to say, and probably ashamed to say, that I hadn't realised the asset of the canals until I'd physically had been on it on a boat. So I think that does go to show that we can squirrel away and do our work and not realise what we have on our doorstep. So it was very good as a council officer to see that as well. And as my title here says, I'm Sport and Physical Activity Manager. I'm within the public health team in the council, and I think it's imperative of us not just to ensure that people are well and healthy. It's how do we do it in a way that's on people's doorsteps, that we maximise the green space, the blue space, spaces and assets that we have. And to that end, myself and my colleagues within the public health team are really keen to maximise, highlight, bring attention to what's on their doorstep, that we can retain and remain physically healthy and well. That doesn't mean just sport and physical activity. What's really important is the concept of being safe, of feeling confident, of enjoyment, and I think that's integral to being healthy as well. So one of the things that we have done as a team, we've got about 12 different projects that we do, from children and young people, adults, families, and older people as well. And one of the, I suppose, the kind of longest projects we've had is our lead walks. We have 22 in the borough, and they've been running for a good number of years. They're led by volunteers. We oversee the volunteers, and they're just local residents who are just committed to walking. They're group-led walks. And I'm delighted to say that there is actually one from the the docking of where we got onto the boat in the Grand Union Canal opposite Useley Health Centre. So we do have a walk. There's one on Sunday, by the way, if anyone would like to attend. It's a grade 5 walk. It's a 5-mile walk, and grade 1 is the easiest and grade 5 is the hardest. But it's an absolute delight, and we do obviously walk on the towpath as well as go into kind of a bit more of the park area. As mentioned when we were together on the boat, is that it's important that we don't just get the ones who normally would come to these activities. We would like to very much activate the local population in and around the canals, and it was great to meet Councillor Farley and also the social prescribing team that were present that operate out of Useley Health Centre. And we now have a date set eventually. Finally, we got a date on I think it's the 18th of December, that we're going to come together to identify what are the needs, what are the challenges, but what are all the opportunities that we can do to put canals central to our activity. And part of the social prescribing agenda is identifying how people can take care of their own health, self-manage, but also as part of our prevention agenda as well within public health. How can we encourage, support, make safe a place for people to use the assets such as the canal? It's now clear, cleaner, more straightforward, and identifies potentially more walks, potentially a cycle ride. It could be an activity that's done in a local park around that. The reason I'm saying all of that is because we do also offer cycle rides, and we've been working with British Cycling in the last few years to identify cycle leadership training courses for local population. So an example of that is in Hayes Town, the Women's Hayes Cycling Legacy Group. Fantastic group of ladies. I think they started in and around the pandemic time. 6 ladies, and now I think there's 90 that meet on a regular basis. And we were able to offer them some bikes, also offer them some grant funding to do some training so that they could train themselves. They shouldn't be dependent on us. Who's to say that we don't do something similar in the Useley West Drayton area as well? It just takes a bike, and it takes a little bit of commitment. It's a bit like walking, something that we can really mobilize, and it's on their doorstep again. One of the other activities that we've been doing is, I suppose, a park-based exercise. It's called Our Parks, and we have a fantastic, just a very dynamic organizer called Bourne Barracore. He's quite well known in the London area for setting up. They're not boot camps. They're so much nicer, and they're so much more inclusive of people who have never done exercise and activity. And one of the things that we're very clear about doing is identifying individuals who just wouldn't want to do any exercise or activity. They're just they don't want to go to a gym. They don't have in their mind perhaps the right equipment. They perhaps don't have the kind of the means and the resources to pay for membership. So we commission Bourne, and he offers free exercise activities. And some of the feedback and the testimonials is just so heartwarming to say, I've been trying to lose weight I'm 4 stone overweight, been trying to lose it for 18 months. I looked at the class, I just thought I would join in. I was made very welcome, and I've lost 3 stone within a year, to the point where people are now, it's a very socialized activity. The parkers, who are the instructors, are really well versed in people's needs, and they're very encouraging. They go and find people. So that's been something we want to do more in areas where people are really reluctant to go out and do something structured or organized. It's all about the relationship. It's all about, this is in your space, in your area, come along and do that. So that's just some activities that we can do in and around, and I'm really quite excited to discuss and identify what we already have and just placing it slightly different. I'm very keen on making sure that we utilize as much as possible space that is on people's doorsteps. It's our neighborhoods, so that people do feel confident in just walking around them, that do feel that they own them and that they can maximize them for their activity. Being active doesn't necessarily mean you have to be sporty. Being active means that you're feeling with confidence to just go about your daily business, but you're potentially using a canal route to get from A to B, potentially getting on a bike to be doing that activity as well. So that's really important for us to do. that's our universal offer, and a lot of our activities are on the council website, from cycling to tennis to cricket to park run, couch to 5. You're all welcome to join in as well. They're all free. Really, really pleased to be able to do that as well, offer it free to residents as well. One of the things that I'm really keen to be doing as well, as I sit in public health, is to link into our health and social care providers as well, to have partnerships. So working with our social workers, working with our social prescribers, working with our PCNs as well. So where there is that point of need, someone who's got high hypertension, and we know that hypertension, excess weight, common mental health conditions, falls and frailty are really quite high in terms of inequality and prevalence, and usually is one of the areas, which is where the canal certainly is, West Drayton as well, where those rates are highest. And it can just become a statistic, but these are individuals that we want to create better opportunities, easier opportunities to say, right, as part of your, it's not necessarily clinical intervention, but as part of your way to improve your own health through the means by which you can do that. That doesn't necessarily require just medication. A lot of the things that we do where there has been benefit in physical health gain, and that could be lower blood pressure, better mobility. People are saying they're sleeping better, but they're also socializing more. They also feel that they've made more friendships. They put these things in their diary so they look forward to coming to them as well. And I think that's really important as part of our offer that we do, that there's the social connecting opportunity where people are feeling welcome, it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's very local. And that's what I would like to do going forward as part of my plan for sport and physical activity, is that broad brush. What are we doing to provide opportunities for people, for children, for families, for adults on a weekend, on a Sunday, when it's light, any time of the year. Pleased to say that our lead walks are 6 days a week, and it's 6 days a week, and I think Christmas is the only day that we don't offer something. So it just goes to show that we have some really dedicated group of volunteers who've been with us for over 18 years delivering on these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite questions from members. Do you have any? Councillor Gardner?
Just an idea. Do you work with the GPs in terms of the stuff that you can do that they can actually prescribe for people to do?
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Yes, we do, and but I think there's a lot to be done, and I have to say, I think it's re-emphasising and putting the message back out to GPs, the importance of doing these things again and again. And I'm really pleased to say that we have great links with GLL, who are a leisure operator, and they have a program called HealthWise, which is a GP referral scheme as well. They have a system whereby a patient who fits a criteria, it could be high blood pressure, diabetes, excess weight. The GP has it within their gift to prescribe a 12-week program into a leisure centre. So we have that. I'm now talking to GLL to say, as part of your offer, does it have to be a leisure centre-based provision? Can it not be outside? So I'm in conversations in 2 weeks' time to now discuss, let's broaden what we do, link it into yours. It's quite seamless. We do need to go back to GPs again and again just to say this should be part of a seamless referral process.
Any other questions? Councillor Punja?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just wanted to say what a wonderful trip that was, and it was really great to meet so many people and have lovely conversations and experience the canal in that way, as somebody who frequents canals quite a lot and walks down the canal paths. But one of the things in this report that I just wanted to kind of highlight, because we've talked about funding gaps and streams, was that the Canals and River Trust highlighted the amount of people that are now living on the canals had doubled, and that is going to mean that there is an increased traffic, I can call it traffic maybe, coming through our waterways and through our borough, which also will impact waste generated, potential antisocial behaviour, potential other kinds of behaviour and needs and requirements locally. There was conversations about the offside land being used, and great. So that was something that was of interesting topic. The chair has got something to say about that later. And one of the things you talked about safety as well, and one of the things that we kind of addressed was how at certain points down that canal, and I know personally, having walked down it many times, the lighting and that safety, and there are certain areas where there is a problem with lighting, and I know that a lot of this was kind of addressed down to being able to cable, or who looks after what bridge and who the ownerships are and stuff. But somewhere along the way, I don't know if people can be brought together and look at the safety of residents over who owns what. I don't know if that is possible, because actually, as we look into today, you know, we've had the White Ribbon Day, and we've had, you know, the whole call for prevention of violence against women and girls. Lighting and safer streets is a real key to that strategy and that story, and I just wanted to bring that up in this meeting.
David, did you wish to say something?
Yes, just picking up on the more people living on the canal. It's certainly noticeable in West Drayton now that there are more boats, and I don't know if anybody knows the canal in Harefield. But you know, the number of moored boats there, and there are these great big wide gin palaces. You know, there is somewhat, you know, it's suddenly increased. The number of boats passing through is not that many, in fact, because it's virtually impossible to get a mooring in central London. I've got a part share in a canal boat, and we bring it down to London every so often. You can't moor in London, so a lot of people don't actually pass through on the canal. But certainly there are more people living on the canal. It's a double-edged sword in a way, because if we tried to get this scheme in Hayes to get more moorings, for the reason that Councillor Punja said, safety. You know, some bits of the towpath are quite isolated and not frequented, or if they are frequented, they're frequented by people doing drugs or drinking or other things. So having moored boats can actually help deal with that. If you've got people circulating about, going about their lawful business, then that makes everybody feel safer. And I think that's an important consideration. Lighting, I totally agree with what you said about lighting. I don't think you got the full picture from the Canal and River Trust on the boat. They've actually stopped us doing lighting. In Hayes, you know, there's a great big data centre being built on the old Ballsbridge Industrial Estate. I convinced the developers to actually pay to light the towpath so that people could get into the town centre and use the station, and the Canal and River Trust turned it down because of the bats. So it's a real thorny subject, but I think in an urban area, you know, lighting is really important, and you know, any support that we can get from you as councillors in trying to get that policy change will be much appreciated.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Maybe I can just summarise then. It was a very interesting trip, and we've seen, as you mentioned earlier, the improvements to the towpaths, particularly from the 106 money, which has made some real big improvements. I think when you look at what's been done and what is planned, I think the entire strip along Hillingdon is more or less scheduled to be done at some point, which is a real good achievement. I don't know how that compares to the neighbouring sort of boroughs as you go along the route, but certainly in Hillingdon that is a really good achievement. There were some areas where I think there could be improvements, and we heard very much about people living on the boats and on the canals. I know that the fees for the moorings were going up, as well as the canals trust mentioned. But the area of concern I found, I think Councillor Punja mentioned it on the trip as well, we was both discussing it, was the issue of the one side being the towpaths and the other side more or less being no man's land. People don't know necessarily also businesses don't really utilise that space behind their shops or their industrial units, and it is really just left to overgrown. And we saw that on the trip where the boat actually struggled at times to get through narrow stretches of the canal where it becomes so overgrown. And it was suggested, which I do concur with, is that we need some change at national level in the legislation to allow businesses to make better use of that strip on their side, particularly with moorings as well. Even just sort of differentiate where you can moor and cannot moor. I don't know if Councillor Bridges wants to say a bit more on that, but that very simple change in legislation will change the canals overnight for the better, I feel. And just ending perhaps on your suggestion of a canal strategy, I do feel that would be very beneficial. Whilst we have made improvements along the canals, it's been very focused on planning development, and we seem to be missing out those other areas such as health and well-being, which can all be joined together in a single strategy document, which I think we could look at in the future. I don't think we have it in the room for in our work programme at present, but it's something we can definitely look at in the near future in greater detail and see if we can develop something along those lines. Councillor Punja?
Thank you, Chair, and I really welcome that opportunity to speak on what we discussed. The offside land was of particular interest to both of us, I think, because where you had the fenced up businesses, they almost don't know that they are maybe leaseholders, if not landowners of that space, and they leave it, and then the responsibility and the cost becomes a burden of the Canal and River Trust. And so we discussed about the legislation, because having that piece of land that then enables people to moor on both sides or to be kept, just taking it away from those that are not upkeeping it, to then giving it either to the Canal and River Trust or to some other party, or putting it into some kind of trust. I don't know what that structure looks like, but I think that, yes, legislation needs to be looked around that, because that could go back into the River Trust being able to fundraise for more, and raise its money in that space. And if we could have more mooring in there, we do create more safety. You're absolutely right, because the more people use a space, the safer it does become, whether you say about high streets or any kind of roads or parks or whatever, that automatically leads to safety. So I really agree with that, and I just think that we've got to look at I suppose places like Richmond, where you see the river going through, and Kew and places like that, really look at the environmental aspect of both sides of their rivers rather than one side. And if people have got houses that go onto that, where there were a place where you had kind of like boats, that they need to look after that. They need to be able to, somebody needs to be able to serve them notice or tell them that space has to be looked after, otherwise they will be invoiced for whatever whatever repairs have to be done to that. So I totally agree that that kind of legislation needs to take place. I also wanted to add in that in looking at a canal strategy, not just looking at it from a health, but also from a social strategy as well, that it becomes part of the social infrastructure. There are so many regeneration programs across this country and through Europe where they have used canals as a development space to create a social integration and cohesion space for communities, and I think that is something that would be beneficial in our area, especially as the towpaths are being cleaned up to be made better use of, so that it's not just about health, but it is about social well-being as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With there being no other questions from members, thank you both, Priscilla and David, for your attendance this evening. We will keep you informed of our activities going forward if we raise it in a future work programme. Thank you very much. Item 6 is our review topic selection, pages 17 to 26. Before we go on to this, I will just inform members that I presented to the last Cabinet meeting our alligating review, which was well received by Cabinet, and they endorsed and adopted the recommendations from this committee and asked me to pass on their thanks to you all for your work on that. And now on to the next one. So whoever wants to start, I know Councillor Farley's had some offline conversations with myself, so whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I would like the committee for the major review to look at the, I don't like the phrase, but I'm going to use it, the customer service element of housing. Specifically the end-to-end, so when someone presents with a housing issue, whichever method that is, that they interact with the council, to the point which they are then processed and then come out the other side. Actually, my colleagues here on this side, that we've had a lot of casework that comes in where the service has been somewhat lacking, and I feel that this committee would essentially give some good recommendations to Cabinet to make improvements to that service. And I would hope that we did try this last year. Unfortunately, there was some restructuring going on, which meant we were not able to do it last year. But it's been a year, and I feel that we, given the casework indications, that we should start looking into this if we can do something along that end-to-end process. Thank you.
Any others? Councillor Gardner?
Well, I just said I endorse that, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm dealing with an incredible amount of cases of people who, how I consider, have been given a poor service. And I think that all of us here will probably be able to make suggestions to how the things can run a bit smoother.
I think certainly from our side, housing is something we need to look at, and it's been long overdue. And as Councillor Farley rightly said, it was deferred last year because of the internal reviews that were ongoing. My only concern is that I think we need to be specific in what we want to look at. Housing is a very vast area, and in particular my concern, and I believe some of the concerns were shared with my colleagues, was the repair service in particular of housing. So I'm more than happy to look at the process, but it would be good to narrow down on some specific points within the housing department to form some substantial areas for recommendations. So happy to go along with that proposal, but I do feel in particular the repair service could... Sorry? You sure? Okay, I'm told it's not. Repairs I would have thought would come under housing, but... Councillor Gardner?
If repairs don't come under housing, then I think the procedure for private lettings, where we go along and we're supposed to, the staff are supposed to examine the properties prior to giving to people. And I'm not talking about social housing, I'm talking about the private rented sector. I'd like to know exactly what they do, what the criteria is, what the box ticking exercises are, because some of the places that we've heard, I mean, I haven't been around to see any, that are not fit for purpose, but they've been signed off.
The other area I would like to look into as well, we heard it, I can't remember when, but it was in recent, probably a year or so ago, our bed and breakfast and temporary housing, which is probably even worse in some accommodations, and it doesn't seem to have much scrutiny because people are in and out so quickly or temporarily that once they've left they probably just want to get away from it and don't bother following up on the reports to the councillors to the conditions of it. So casting a bit of light on that would be helpful. Councillor Punja?
Yes, I think, and that temporary housing that you're talking about actually links into the lettings, because a lot of it is done through private landlords and letting agencies as well, in our experience. I just wanted to say that at our last meeting, when we had the low Carter review, there were some across the board, there were some really good questions that were asked. There was so much engagement in that process as well, and there were lots of questions asked and needed that actually I wonder if there could be, whilst you say it's a broad subject, maybe there are sub-subjects in between that actually maybe there's 2 or 3 that need to be looked at, because so many of those questions that we asked on that day were about our learning of the system as well, and our learning of those procedures so that we can best impact and help our residents that come to us, so the burden then doesn't become on the council officers because we've got the answers ahead of schedule.
Any other comments? Councillor Smallwood?
Chair, happy to endorse what all colleagues have said, and I'm sure that you can come up with some sort of very, I think it does need to be focused, otherwise we'll just end up getting, it's so broad that we can end up getting very lost very quickly and actually having no real impact, and I'm sure you and the Labour League can come up with that. I just wonder whether as a one-off topic, I don't think we've looked at the impact of both Heathrow Airport and the ongoing elephant in the room of the third runway, which obviously is a cut-crossing topic, but just the impact that continues to have on residents in and around there, and actually on all residents with air pollution. So I just wonder whether that could be a one-off topic where we could invite in various parties to take our questions. I'm not sure we can do a whole review on it, but it's just something I think we should keep always focused in our mind in our continued opposition to a third runway at Heathrow, and also making sure that the airport continue or attempt to continue to be good neighbours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smallwood. Yes, I agree. If you're happy, what I would suggest for the time being, we could add it as an information item. Yeah, and then we can go from there if we want to look into that a bit more. But I think getting the feeling around the table this evening, we are agreed that we will look at housing. What will consist from that, we'll have to go into a bit more detail, but if the committee is happy to, I suggest that myself and the Labour liaison come up with some selected points that are within the remit, and we can put forward some a short list at the next meeting to agree on, if that's okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Item 7 is our forward plan. Councillor Gardner, thank you. There wasn't any other comments on that, was there? And item 8 is the work programme, page 39 to 42. All happy with that? Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes our business for this evening, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.